Welcome to the Trail and Ultra Running Training Podcast. My name is Will Frantz, and I'm here to help you improve your training so you can have more fun out on the trails. Welcome back to the Trail and Ultra Running Training Podcast. If you find this space useful and beneficial to your training, please leave a rating or review, or even better, just share it with someone else who you think would find this useful. All of those things tell our, the algorithm overlords that someone likes what I'm doing here, which pushes it to more people, which is the whole reason we're doing this in the first place, is so I can try to provide a little more free training advice to the internet that is often filled with bad free training advice. So if you haven't done all that, please do. And let's get into a conversation about data. A lot of the time when we look at training, we get very involved in data or data collection, or what our numbers are, or what our paces are, or how we're sleeping, or however you may want to observe all of these things. And a lot of the time you don't need more data, you need better data. We need to track the stuff that matters, like how much are you lifting for how many reps? How fast are you running for how long? When we're looking at athletics, the thing that really matters is performance. Performance is the proxy that judges how we're doing. We should also probably have some subjective stuff that matters to you. Did you have time, or were you able to go to your kid's sports game? That kind of stuff is also really important, right? But performance is the proxy when we're looking at athletics. And that is what we should track. And we should track that pretty well, because you won't remember over time. With as much as we run, you aren't going to remember every run from last year. You're probably going to remember the really good ones and the really bad ones. And when you look back on your pace, you are probably going to remember whatever fits your current narrative of how your performance is doing. So if you currently feel like you're really slow, you might be, but you might also just remember the good runs, in quotes, where you hit 7-minute miles or 6-minute miles, and you completely forget all of the runs where you were spending a lot of time at 11 or 12-minute miles. Now, because of whatever you're training for, you don't do the 6-7-minute stuff much anymore, but your easy average has gone from 11:30 to 10:15. You're not slow. We've just shifted your, we've focused on more of an ultra pace of this really long distance stuff, and you've gotten faster. You've just gotten faster in the slower range, right? Same with lifting. A lot of people, tends to be middle-aged dudes, but not all the time, that I coach, they remember their PRs from when they were 25, and they want to get back to that. Well, at that time, they were benching hard 3 times per week and never did legs. And not to mention the testosterone difference from now and 30 years ago. Of course they were benching 225 for 10, but now that it has no relevance to their current life. And just a reminder, if you haven't lifted in 20 years, you're not an experienced lifter. Same with if you haven't run in 20 years, you're probably not an experienced runner, unless you happen to go to the Olympics in either of these things and take a lot of time off because you got burnt out. And then even then, you would more or less want to start from scratch due to lack of current experience. Your current experience level relates to your current training, not your training from decades past. But anyway, sorry, that's a tangent. All of this data collecting that we're doing all of the time is just not helpful. In fact, it can be pretty harmful, because we look at all of these metrics. We don't know what to do with half of them. We don't act on most of them. And as a result, we just end up it just becomes noise. It becomes this white noise, and our brains still just pick out the shining highlights and lowlights from the mess. Let's look at sleep tracking, for example. And this is a thing I tracked for years. I started when I was working night shift. I was trying to figure out how to make some things better. And in retrospect, it wasn't, life-changing. It gave me some clear data points, but could have also just realized that drinking a gallon of coffee a day was probably not helping my sleep. And it forced me to look at that, but I could have also just, done that because I knew that. And so if we're going to look at sleep tracking, like used appropriately, it can help someone make some changes. Like you can see how your sleep looks doing what you're currently doing. And then you make a couple changes at a time and see if it improves at all. But that's not how like most of us use it. Typically we aren't particularly mindful about our daily actions. Like a lot of these sleep trackers, I used to wear an Oura Ring, will give you a space for notes. Most people don't use the notes function, so we don't really know what we did throughout the day. We don't necessarily know what changes we made. We just know that the sleep went up and down, and we don't like keep enough like actual action points to see what we did. And then we like flop in bed and sleep however we sleep, and we wake up, and then our watch or our ring tells us that we slept badly, so we get stressed about sleeping badly, and then that brings sleep anxiety. I heard on a podcast with Andy Galpin, and so like he's a reliable source on these kind of things. And sleep trackers are often connected to worse sleep over time, especially if we check them first thing in the morning, because it dictates how you feel throughout your day. Say you like woke up and you actually felt pretty good, but then your sleep tracker tells you that you slept poorly. That tends to make you feel worse, and you go through your day with this feeling that you just are underslept and you're tired because your ring told you should be tired. And in theory, this is how they would be most useful, right? Like you wake up, you check your score on your Oura or your Whoop or your Garmin or whatever, you see how rested you are, and you adjust your training and activity accordingly. But that doesn't work too well because when it comes to athletics, remember, performance is the proxy. And I've set a few different PRs on poor nights of sleep. I just needed extra time to warm up, and I appreciated the fact that I probably wasn't the most rested, but it was fine. And since the brain is so powerful, we end up in this like space where knowing that our sleep wasn't great leads to worse performance. So the best way to use a sleep tracker is you look at the data at the end of the day or a day later, and you make adjustments on a lag. It's much like using calories when I'm talking to someone about like weight loss or weight gain. We make adjustments based on like weekly averages, and probably not for a couple weeks at a time. You don't adjust based on daily intake. You don't adjust based on whatever your watch thought your calorie burn was. My weight fluctuates a good 5 pounds throughout the day, and my days don't follow a completely consistent pattern. So it's very likely that one morning I will weigh this amount, and the next morning I will weigh much less or much more than that amount. And this is true for most people. I've just gone through periods of my life where I've stepped on a scale multiple times per day. So I've seen it. For the record, that was not great in my 20s. That was kind of disordered. And then when I did it again recently, it was more research driven, but probably not a thing I would recommend to anybody else unless you really want to get an understanding of how multiple things adjust the scale and you have a good relationship with body weight. Otherwise, probably don't do that. It's not a good thing to get obsessive over. But this is the whole point with more data. It doesn't help unless we know what to do with it. And it doesn't help, and it's not worth collecting, rather, unless it's going to change your course of action. If collecting data isn't going to change your course of action, then it's not worth getting that data because it's not going to do anything other than maybe create anxiety. So on one hand, we should train off of good data. Hey, I remember running 6 miles in the past is not good enough to actually provide any adjustments to action or where we currently are. On the other hand, something like I have an HRV score of 47 and I slept 6 hours and 23 minutes last night and I ate 2,475 calories and my TSS score is whatever and blah, blah, blah. We're not going to act on all of that. we're not going to, it's very unrealistic that you are going to adjust your workout pace from like 8:30 to 8:20 and like mildly adjust calorie intake based on that level of data. Instead, you're probably just going to go out, run the workout pretty hard today, eat a bagel sandwich on the way to work, and then try to get some sleep. And if that sounds more like you and how you're going to run your life, it's more or less how I run my life, then you don't need that level of specificity in your data, because all it's really doing is fostering more anxiety over things that you're not going to change. Data is great as long as it guides a course of action, and as long as it guides a course of action well. So collect a few points of data, make it good, make it relevant to what we're trying to do, and then act on it. And if you're not going to act on it, don't bother collecting it, because the last thing we need is more anxiety, and more data often just leads to this weird feedback loop where the existence of the data is just making the data worse. And now that I've said that word probably 2,000 times in the last 10 minutes, I'm going to call this one. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll be back soon with another one. Thank you for listening to the Trail and Ultra Running Training Podcast. Honestly, I'm still surprised and honored that anybody wants to hear what I have to say, so thank you. To be clear, not a doctor, nor a registered dietitian, or any other kind of medical professional. I'm a personal trainer, a nutrition coach, and a running coach, and I have a passion for training trail runners. You should always speak with a qualified medical professional before making any changes to your training or nutrition program. If you enjoyed the podcast or found it helpful, please take a second to leave a rating or review. I'd really appreciate it. Or you could just share it with someone for whom you think it might be helpful. I make these kinds of things in order to provide more quality, free resources to people, so the more people who hear it, the better. If you want more of this information, please head to the Trail and Ultra Running Training group on Facebook, where we discuss all aspects of training so you can have more fun doing the sport that you love. Thank you again for listening.